Greece had been living under the domination of the Ottoman Turks, but the Greeks were united by a common language and the Greek Orthodox religion. A rising national movement led to a revolt in 1821, which was led by Alexander Ypsilanti. The great powers were opposed to revolution, so supported the Ottoman Empire. However, in 1827, Great Britain, France, and Russia responded to popular demand and told Turkey to accept an armistice, but the Turks refused. The three powers then trapped a Turkish fleet at Navarino and destroyed it. In 1830, Great Britain, France, and Russia declared Greece independent. In Great Britain, only 8% of the population could vote for representatives in Parliament. A set of laws called the Corn Laws were passed in 1815, and they prohibited the importation of grain until prices at home rose substantially. As well as this, the Tory government temporarily suspended the rights of peaceable assembly and habeas corpus. The Six Acts placed controls on heavily taxed press and eliminated mass meetings. Later, the Whig Party introduced an Act to amend the representation of the people of England and Wales, which was passed by the House of Commons but rejected by the House of Lords. However, the King threatened to replace the House of Lords, so they agreed to pass the Act. The Reform Bill of 1832 showed that the House of Commons was an important legislature. Now, 12% of men were able to vote. The People's Charter of 1838 was inspired by the distress of the working class who wanted universal male suffrage. After the potato famine, Prime Minister Robert Peel joined with the Whigs to repeal the Corn Laws. Another important reform law was the 10 Hours Act of 1847 that limited the workday of women and young people to 10 hours. In Ireland, Irish Catholics rented land from Protestants who lived in England. This made peasants very poor, but despite this, the population kept growing. In 1845, 1846, 1848, and 1851, there were crop failures, which led to the Great Famine. There was widespread starvation and fevers, but the British government stayed committed to laissez-faire economics. Louis XVIII signed the Constitutional Charter in 1814, which was basically a liberal charter. It protected the gains of the middle class and peasantry, allowed intellectual and artistic freedom, and created a parliament with upper and lower houses. Still, only 100,000 out of 30 million males could vote. The next monarch was Charles X, who was a reactionary. Charles conquered Algeria, which led to the rebirth of French colonial expansion. Charles also stripped the middle class of voting rights and censored the press. Eventually, the government collapsed and Charles fled. Louis-Philippe, the Duke of Orleans, was put on the throne, and he accepted the Constitutional Charter of 1814. Bad harvests in France led to higher food prices and caused unemployment. Along with this, Louis-Philippe's bourgeoisie monarchy was corrupt and there was class injustice. All these factors led to barricades being put up on February 22, 1848. On February 24th, Louis-Philippe abdicated for his grandson. The common people didn't want a monarchy. This led to the proclamation of a provisional republic, with a 10-man executive committee called the First French Republic. People soon started drafting a constitution for France's Second Republic. There were problems caused by the conflicting goals of the moderate middle-class liberal Republicans who only wanted universal male suffrage, and the radical Republicans and artisans who wanted socialism. These conflicting goals were brought to the fore in 1848. Louis Blaine was a Republican socialist in the provisional government who wanted the socialist right to work. He created national workshops, and many people came to Paris to work in them. Around this time, the Constituent Assembly was formed with a Republican majority, because the idea of a socialist revolution evoked a violent reaction in all classes, since nobody wanted to lose land. Blaine was dropped from the executive committee, and there was no longer any representation of the Parisian working class. Because of this, artisans and unskilled workers invaded the Constituent Assembly on May 15th. The government responded with the middle-class National Guard. On June 22nd, national workshops in Paris were dissolved, creating a spontaneous uprising. After 3 June days and the death of 10,000 people, the Republican Army, under General Louis Cavaignac, won. The Constituent Assembly made a constitution with a strong executive, and Louis Napoleon won the election in September of 1848. In Austria, liberals began demanding a written constitution, a representative government, and more civil liberties. Under the stress of such demands, monarchs collapsed and granted everything. However, when the revolution broke down, the monarchs reasserted their authority. In response to the demands of liberals in the Austrian Empire, Ferdinand I promised reforms and a constitution. After the monarchy abolished serfdom, freed people lost interest, and so the revolution died down due to the instability of the coalition of the revolution. Hungarian revolutionaries wanted to unify Hungary into a nation, but minority groups like the Croatians, Serbs, and Romanians did not want this. The Habsburg monarchy exploited these minorities and put them in combat with the new government. The Archduchess Sophia, who was a Bavarian princess, married the emperor's brother, which provided a rallying point for the minorities. She insisted that Ferdinand, who had no heir, abdicated in favor of her son Francis Joseph. Everyone agreed, and there was a conspiracy around Sophia to crush the revolution. The army bombarded Prague and crushed the revolution on June 17th. Austrian officials led various minorities against the Hungarian government. The Austrian army then retook Vienna after 4,000 casualties. Francis Joseph was crowned in December of 1848, and he now only needed to gain control of Hungary. Nicholas I of Russia offered his help, and 130,000 Russian troops subdued Hungary. Prussian liberals wanted to make absolutist Prussia into a liberal constitutional monarchy. Artisans and factory workers joined with the middle class, and Frederick William IV caved. In March, he granted Prussia a constitution and merged Prussia into a new German state. Workers issued democratic demands that had socialist leanings, and the middle class was concerned, so conservatives urged the king to counter revolution. An elected Prussian Constituent Assembly met in Berlin to write a constitution. A committee of liberals from German states called for a national assembly to write a federal constitution. In Frankfurt in May, a national assembly met. However, they fought with Denmark over the provinces of Schleswig and Holstein. Frederick VII, King of Denmark, tried to integrate the states into his state, so Germans in these provinces revolted. The National Assembly called on the Prussian army to oppose Denmark. The National Assembly finished writing the Constitution in March of 1849 and elected Frederick William of Prussia the Emperor of the German national state. Frederick then reasserted his royal authority and disbanded the Constituent Assembly. Frederick's subjects now had a limited conservative constitution. Frederick tried to get small monarchs in Germany to elect him emperor, but Austria balked. Austria then forced Prussia to renounce schemes of unification, and the German Confederation was re-established.